That's the big question, right? How does a dynasty that lasted for 180 million years, spanning every single continent, just vanish off the face of the Earth? Well, it's a massive scientific detective story, and the clues are literally buried deep within the planet itself.
And before we get to the end, you really have to appreciate the sheer scale of their empire. We're not just talking about a handful of species. For over 180 million years, dinosaurs were absolutely everywhere. They evolved into every shape and size you can imagine, from tiny little feathered creatures to the biggest land animals that have ever walked the planet. They were, without a doubt, a global success story. And then, 66 million years ago, that story comes to a dead stop.
So the first real break in this incredible cold case didn't come until 1980. A team of scientists, led by the father-son duo Lewis and Walter Alvarez, stumbled upon a clue. It was this single, thin layer of clay, and it was found all over the globe. This wasn't just some random layer of dirt. No, this was the fingerprint of a single, world-altering, catastrophic event.
This layer has a name. It's called the KPG boundary. For geologists, this is like a giant, stark dividing line in the book of Earth's history. Everything below that line, that's the age of dinosaurs, the Cretaceous period. Everything above it, that's the age of mammals, the Paleogene. And right on that line, that thin layer of clay, is the evidence of total devastation.
And here it is, the smoking gun. Inside that clay, they found incredibly high levels of iridium. Now, iridium is super rare here on the Earth's surface, but you know where it's really common? In asteroids. The implication was just staggering. Something huge, something from outer space, had slammed into our planet.
Okay, so an iridium layer all over the world is one thing, but where's the crater? Where's the impact site? Well, the crime scene was finally located in 1991, and it was buried underneath the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. It's called the Chicxulub crater, and honestly, its scale is almost impossible to wrap your head around. To even begin to understand the power of this thing, you have to look at the numbers. Let's start with the object itself. An asteroid maybe 15 kilometers wide. We're talking about a rock bigger than Mount Everest is tall, just hurtling through the blackness of space.
And the speed, it's just mind-bending. It was traveling at 20 kilometers per second. That is so fast it could cross the entire United States in less than 4 minutes.
When it hit, it left a scar, a crater, over 180 kilometers wide, and it vaporized billions of tons of rock in an instant.
But here's the number that really matters: the energy release. This wasn't just a big bang. This was an event with the force of billions of atomic bombs all going off in the exact same spot at the exact same time.
But here's the crazy twist in the story. The immediate blast, as unbelievably devastating as it was, wasn't what killed most of the dinosaurs. Nope, the real killer, the thing that caused the extinction, was the chain reaction that happened next. It triggered a global winter that literally choked the planet to death.
You see, the impact blasted so much pulverized rock, dust, and sulfur high up into the atmosphere that it basically blocked out the sun, not for days, but for months, maybe even years. Photosynthesis just stopped, the plants died, and the entire food chain collapsed like a house of cards, starting from the very bottom. First, the herbivores who ate the plants starved. Then, the carnivores who ate the herbivores had nothing left to eat.
The result was a mass extinction on a scale that is hard to fathom. An estimated 75% of all life on Earth was wiped out. Just think about that. 3 out of every 4 species just vanished forever. But in the middle of all that death and destruction, somehow 25% of species made it through. So that brings us to the next big mystery. Why them? What was the difference between being a victim of the apocalypse and being a survivor?
Well, it really boiled down to a few key things. If you were big, like a T-Rex, you needed a ton of food, which was now gone. But if you were small, like our tiny little mammal ancestors, you could get by on a lot less. If you had a really specialized diet, you were in big trouble. But if you were a generalist, someone who could eat insects, seeds, roots, whatever you could find, you had a fighting chance. And crucially, if you could burrow underground, you could physically hide from the worst of the chaos raging on the surface.
All right, now for the final fascinating piece of this puzzle. It turns out the asteroid might not have been working alone. The latest science suggests it may have had an accomplice. For hundreds of thousands of years before the impact, the planet was already in deep trouble thanks to another massive force of nature.
This timeline really puts it all into perspective. You see, for more than 300,000 years, there were these enormous, non-stop volcanic eruptions happening in India, what we call the Deccan Traps. They were spewing incredible amounts of climate-altering gases into the atmosphere. This was already stressing ecosystems, already making life difficult all over the globe. So the world was already sick when the asteroid delivered its final terrible blow.
So today, the leading theory is this 1-2 punch idea. The volcanoes had put the planet on the ropes. They made the global ecosystem weak and vulnerable. The asteroid was the knockout. It was the final, devastating blow that ended the age of reptiles and, as it turned out, cleared the way for the rise of mammals and eventually us.
And I want to leave you with this one last thought, which is just so cool. Not all the dinosaurs died. One small, feathery branch of the dinosaur family tree managed to survive, and over millions of years they evolved into the birds we see all around us today. So seriously, the next time you see a sparrow or a pigeon in the park, just take a second and remember, you're not just looking at a bird. You are looking at a living, breathing dinosaur that survived the day the world burned.